life with economic opportunity.
Terrorize the people.
Doug Weed, author of All the President's Children.
All the President's Children who work for...
How did this terrific book, which I've never seen anything like it before, a summary of the successes and failures and happinesses and miseries of all the presidential children, how did this...
Doug Weed, your excellent service in government at the White House and in the private sector, leading the effort for famine relief in Africa and Asia, is a reminder that wherever we work, we can work to serve others.
Freedom to build your business. What difference does it make? Law keeps you down, but there you are, success.
Influencing his decision.
I think it's a very important part.
Thank you, Doug Weed.
To look it over and look at the kind of phenomena. Doug, good morning. Good to have you.
Which I've never seen anything like.
Now, if that's not where Bush is more confrontational than his father.
So I spent the next 30 minutes.
I've been there in Calcutta, India, and seen those ladies sit there on their haunches. Hundreds of them lined up against a bank, and they'll scoop up a handful of manure, cow manure, and back and forth. And when they got a nice little pancake, splat against the wall, the hillside, hour after hour, till the hillside is covered with little patties of cow manure, and they'll rotate down on their haunches and scoop up more manure. And by the end of the day, there are thousands of these little manure patties baking in the sun on the hillside, and the wind blows through them and dries them out. And the next day, they light a match to those little cow patties, those manure patties, and they burn and they cook their meal over them. It's their energy. And they get sick. And it heats their hovel at night. They put some rocks in the middle, and it burns, and those rocks get warm, and that gives warmth to their little hovel. That's their energy, and that's always been energy. That's where life comes from, death. The only difference in developed nations is the billions of years that go into the process. We take the skin and the bone and the manure and the guts and the flesh, and a billion years later, it becomes the fossil fuel and the oil that drives modern civilization. Because all power and all energy and all art and all success comes from death, and defeat, and pain. And why I was so moved to realize, at an adult level, the nuances of what we believed and why. How divided we were within one nation, within one religion. How many shades and colors. How bitter the differences were. And when it was reduced to our children, it was so extraordinarily simple. And what amazed me was, we know, all of us know, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists. We all know that we only have a child for 5 years. We know that. We know that the 8-year-old kid that comes racing through the kitchen is already gone. We love him, we hug him, we see little moments where we got him, but we know he's gone because after about 5 years, we know he's become the captive of his peers. And we're helpless. They will put him in prison or bring him before kings. We know that we are the captives of our peers. That's why an event like this is not a waste of money or time. He who walks with the wise grows wise, Solomon said. But for 5 years, we have that little girl or that little boy, and only for 5 years, they're putty We can tell them anything. We can teach them to lie. We can teach them to hate. We can teach them to love. We can do what we want for about 5 years and they're gone. And what do we do instinctively? What do we do? Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist. We all do the same thing. Asian, European. We all do the same thing. Latin America, North America. We say, honey, if your mama dies and your daddy dies, and the people who raise you hate you and make you work, and the other little girls get to have all the fun, and you don't have anything good happen in your life, there is such a thing as magic. And in a moment, you can be a princess and live in a palace. This is what we tell this little girl. We tell the little boy. There was a shoe cobbler's son, an apprentice. He worked for the son of the shoe cobbler. And there was a dragon who lived under the castle in Krakow, and he terrorized the people once a year. And we tell the story of the little boy who saved the country from the dragon. Anything's possible. We, jaded, cynical, fearful, we must actually, deep down inside, believe that's true still. Or we wouldn't teach it with the door shut, going to bed, feeding it into their subconscious, unless we still believed it's true. It's true. Anything can happen. It can happen to you.
Cities. It was a rare city in that we were proud of our city, and most people are not proud of their cities. Most people don't like their city. The city they're in at the time, they like it after they move to another city, and then they look back fondly and brag about all the restaurants in the other city. But they usually don't do that till they move to the next city. Then they brag on the city they were in before. We had a bigger shopping center there and that sort of thing. So this was an unusual city in that the people liked it while they were right there. And it was very positive, and so I grew up with kind of a duality here. I mean, on the one hand, I felt bad about everything, guilty about everything. On the other hand, I was very proud. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. We were positive. We were growing. We had the 500 mile. We made Alka-Seltzer. Back in those days, see, I grew up in the 1950s, and back then there were just communists everywhere. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, there were communists in the school system. There were communists in government. There were communists in the 500 mile. There was one year. So there were just like communists everywhere. It was a really scary time. And the thing back in the 1950s was you had to be real cool. The idea was not to say something that would upset anybody, or you didn't want to have a hair out of place, or you didn't want to, so you just basically kept your mouth shut because you're afraid you'd say something that was uncool and then they'd make fun of you. And so everything had to kind of, and calm, you know, easy, cool. The word was cool. So I remember back then we used to have these atomic bomb drills at Fall Creek Grade School in Indianapolis in case the Soviets attacked, because Indianapolis was a great city. I mean, we assumed that if the Soviets would attack the United States, they'd take out Indianapolis. I mean, I thought, you know, if I worked in the Kremlin, I'd take out Washington, D.C., New York, Indianapolis. I mean, you take out Alka-Seltzer, the whole country gets a headache. I mean, let me ask you this. Can you imagine the United States being ruled by the Soviet Union and they allowing the 500 mile to take place? I mean, I couldn't believe that back home in Indiana, they would stop that. So, and then we had the Soldiers and Sailors Monument downtown. Every time I drove by that place, I thought, man, the communists will take this out. Because it had it was a fountain, and it had two soldiers up there, and it was a monument, and the lights would come, different colored lights would come on and everything, and that's the sort of thing they just would not allow to stand. So we would have atomic bomb drills on Thursday in Fall Creek, and then we'd have fire drills on Friday, and the fire drill was a bell, and the atomic bomb drill was a siren. That's how you could tell the difference. It was a bell or siren. Of course, you're a kid. Sometimes, you know, you'd say, is this a fire or is this, well, children, A siren, that's right, a siren is a sign of nuclear attack. So what they would do is they'd have us all stand. When the siren would go off on a Thursday, we'd all stand, and the teacher would say, all right, boys and girls, you know what that means? That's a siren. That means that the Soviet Union has launched their missiles, and they've actually crossed NORAD or NODAD or Conrad or something up in Canada. I don't know what it was. It was like, I think, in my mind, it was like a string or something they had laid down in Canada, and when it went over that thing, some guy, telephoned, and so they said, whatever the thing was, we had 15 minutes, which they explained to us wasn't enough time for us to go home. So we had to, go through a whole nuclear thing without our parents, which, was lonely, but there was no time to get home. You didn't want to get caught in the bus, was the thing. So the siren would go off. We thought, well, we got 15 minutes, so there's no big rush because we're not going home. So all we got to do is get under the table. We got 15 minutes to get under the table. And the whole thing in the 50s was be cool, was not to panic. And the teacher would say, what's the first thing we do, boys and girls? And we'd all say together in unison, because we did this every Thursday, was stay calm. We'd all say that because this would be emphasized, and above all else was not to run. If there's a fire, you don't run. If there was the big thing, swimming pools, don't run. It was just don't run. So this is a nuclear attack. Stay calm. That's the first thing. And you're always, as a young person, you're in a hurry. You're thinking, okay, I'm calm. What's the second thing? So, and then the next thing we do is we crawl underneath these little plastic tables we had. It was like this. It was good stuff. I mean, this. You'd think, man, you couldn't break that, So we crawl underneath these plastic tables, and then the third thing was, after you were underneath the plastic tables, we'd put our hands over our heads like this. So, and everybody had to do that, of course. Jimmy, he's not putting his hands over his head. Okay. So you all had to put your hands over your heads like that to protect. I thought many times, let's say the Soviets had attacked the United States in the 1950s. Of course, they go for Indianapolis. Let's say that they drop a 50 megaton bomb and it falls on Fall Creek Grade School. I mean, let's say the roof doesn't hold, because this is huge. They made bigger bombs than we did. So, and let's say if the roof doesn't hold, we're underneath these plastic tables. Let's say the plastic table didn't hold. See, that was the reason for the extra precaution of having your hands over your head. So I thought, hey, my brain is my second favorite organ, so I'm going to do everything that I can to protect my brain. And then, of course, the thought crosses my mind, well, what happens if the table doesn't hold, and then your fingers, and it goes like through, halfway, and then you got ugly hands. Then your kids will say, boy, Pops, your hands sure are ugly. And you say, yes, they're ugly on this side, but they're perfect on this side. And if it weren't for these ugly hands, you wouldn't be here. It was these ugly hands that withheld the last little bit of the nuclear attack on Fall Creek Grade School in 1954, young man. So, but we were never attacked. The Soviets never did it. And then sometimes the student would say, teacher, is this a drill or is this real? And the teacher, one to keeping us prepared, would say, well, we don't know that, do we, boys and girls? And I often would think they were real, because I was thinking, hey, if I was working in the Kremlin and we were doing a nuclear attack, when would you do it? Thursday, when they're having the drill at Fall Creek and they're thinking it's a drill. Would be perfect. I also thought if I recruited a communist spy, I would get Mrs. Bowman in the 3rd grade, because why would they recruit some kid when they could get the teacher? So I thought she was a communist. She may have been a communist, but the media covered it up. And so when the Cold War ended, I was in the White House. I couldn't find her file. She was dead by then anyway. So.
French are wonderful people. Then they're into style, and they're such clever people, but they like France. I mean, what can I say? They like France. I mean, they like French wine. They like their language. I mean, it's impossible to learn the language of French, because everybody in the world is sensitive about something. You can't mess with something, whatever they are, whether it's territorial, if it's a state or it's a country or nation or ethnic group. There's some things we're sensitive about, and nobody else can talk about them but us. And unfortunately, with the French, they're sensitive about their language, so you have to speak it perfectly. So, I mean, there's no place to learn it.
because you can't learn it. You just have to have it all immediately, perfectly, and in French it's forever. I mean, they don't speak it perfectly, so how can a complete stranger speak it perfectly? I mean, and then the idioms, you have to learn the idioms, you know, like we say in English that I changed my mind. Well, I mean, it doesn't work. I mean, you say that in French and they just laugh at you. They picture, you know, you've got a shelf of these mines and you're taking one off and you unscrew it and lift it off and get another one, and they use a different idiom. And, you know, we fly on airplanes and they laugh. You know, if I say I flew on the airplane, they laugh. You flew on the airplane, huh? Because in France, they fly in the airplanes. So, I mean, it's just different, you know, and they keep their blood cold, which just makes me laugh. You know, they'll say, keep your blood cold. You know, you fasten your seatbelt, and in case of emergency, keep your blood cold, you know. Or it's on the back of the motel door, you know, in case of fire, first thing, keep your blood cold. How do you do that? You know, gardez votre sang-froid, that's the deal. So it's different. I mean, it's, you know, this has happened to me twice. I've been on the French metro, this 2 times now. Been on the French metro and sit down. It's kind of dirty. I mean, it's, you know, it's nicer than some metros, but, and I will buy a Le Monde. I mean, so that I can sit on it so it won't get dirty. I mean, some Americans have to get the Financial Times, I'll just tell you that. So, but I buy Le Monde. It's kind of small and it fits nice and it's leftist, and so I sit on that while I'm riding on the metro. And twice this has happened. Somebody sitting next to me says, they can tell you're American immediately. They look at you, Tammy, and they know you're an American. So he said, "Pardon, monsieur, but are you reading that newspaper?" So I told my wife, you know, this is just idiotic. I mean, they think Americans are configured differently or something. I said, you know, the next time that happens to me, I'm going to say, "Mais oui, monsieur," and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to turn the page and I'm going to sit back down again. When I was in high school, I mean, the teachers and the coach and everybody would just really berate, and they'd say, "Weed, you can't get away with that in the real world." They keep talking about the real world. You can't do that in the real world. Well, this is it. We're out of high school. We're out of college. This is it. Sorry, folks. Here we are, couch potatoes. This is the real world. What are we waiting for? This isn't death. It may seem like death to you, but death is different than this. This is not death. This is life. You know, you can be enthusiastic. There have been times in your life when you've been enthusiastic. You know you have that ability to be enthusiastic. You know you have a great imagination. You go to Disney World and you think, I could do this. You have a great imagination. You know you could be charming. That's how you finally got married. You were charming for a brief period of time. So you know you can be charming. So why do we take the charm and put it in bottles and cork it and put it in our wine cellar? And the enthusiasm, why is all that distilled and put in bottles and corked and saved down in the wine cellar? When are we going to ever break the bottles? When will we be charming? At what point will we be enthusiastic? We know we can work. When will we work? When we're dead? When are we going to do these things? Why do the bottles sit there? Get them out. Break them open. Pour them. Use the enthusiasm. Use the work. Use the charm. Do something. You know, when I spoke for the first time in Eastern Europe, I was afraid I'd never get a chance to speak in Eastern Europe, and I was afraid that and it was because I'd worked on the senior staff at the White House, and I was afraid I wouldn't be allowed to go into Eastern Europe, but the Berlin Wall came down, everything changed, there I was. I don't know why they wouldn't want me to go to Eastern Europe. Maybe they're afraid I could have told them secrets of network marketing, and, you know, or something, but, or maybe the KGB would, you know, torture me. You know, what's the real secret? Tapes, books, functions. Yes. And they'd say, "That's not true. Tell me the real secret. Turn it up." Because nobody ever believes that, no matter what you tell them. So, and I finally was speaking in Hungary, and it was wonderful. And I loved the Hungarian people, and I loved the food. And as a little boy, I was 10 years old during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. I'll save you a lot of time. I'm 54 years old. And I was watching this on television, and my parents, and they were so discouraged, my parents would turn it off because it was just kind of
it was just unpleasant to watch because we all knew the outcome. I mean, all the commentators and pundits, even back then, they had some of them, not as many, and they were saying, this is it, this is amazing, you know, why are they doing this? I mean, Macmillan's not going to go to war over Hungary. Here's a nation of 10 million people, and they're wonderful people, but the timing isn't good, and Eisenhower's not going to risk a nuclear war over Hungary, and this was decided at Yalta, and maybe it was a mistake, but hey, there's nothing Britain can do about it, and there's nothing the United States can do about it, and there's nothing that's going to happen, and we know what's going to happen, except the Soviets will come in and it's going to stop. But it went on. And my parents would turn off the radio and turn off the TV, and I'd turn it back on to watch it. We didn't have as many channels, but we had TV. It was fascinating to me. Who are these people? And then a weird thing happened. The Soviets came, and there were factory workers, and there were students, and they were issuing up out of the sewers, and they were using Molotov cocktails that the Soviets, Lenin had taught them how to do, and so they were blowing up Soviet tanks, and they won. And the Soviet Soviet full division was pulled out of Budapest and camped about 40 miles north near the Polish border. And Western journalists rushed into Budapest, and the cameras were everywhere, and the students and the people were celebrating in the streets, and they were singing songs they hadn't sung in years, and they were holding candlelight vigils and walking along the Danube, and the restaurants were opened up, and they served all the food they had free of charge, and nobody closed all night long, 24 hours a day, day after day, for almost a week. The Hungarians celebrated their brief moment of freedom, and again, it was so depressing to watch or hear because the pundits said, ooh, this is worse, because now they've made them mad, and they're going to come back, and they're going to have more force, and there's going to be bloodshed, and a lot of people are going to be hurt. And I'm watching this on television, and it happened. They came back, and they crushed it in the Hungarian Revolution, just like the Prague Spring in '68 was crushed. And I'm telling this story from stage in Budapest, Hungary, telling the Hungarians what it looked like for a 10-year-old boy in the United States to watch all of this going on. And I talked about a radio station, because there was a radio station. Oh, it was great growing up in the 1950s, because they'd interrupt, you know, on the school intercom, and they'd give us announcements, and they tried to keep us informed, you know, of what was going on in the world. Nowadays, it doesn't matter, I guess. But they'd let us know, like the World Series was very important, you know. I mean, it was more important than biology, so they'd run the World Series right on the PA system back in the 1950s. Can you believe that? So anyway, they were running this radio station, pirate radio station, operating out of Budapest, and it was playing right into Fall Creek Grade School in Indianapolis, Indiana, so all us little kids could hear the last gasp of the Hungarian Revolution. And they had this great broadcast to the world. Peoples of the world, listen to the alarm bells ringing from Hungary. And they'd say it in French, and they'd say it in English, and they'd say it in German. And we who once defended Europe from Asiatic barbarians in the East, listen now to our cry of help. Help us, SOS. The light vanishes, SOS. Help us with not with words, but with arms, with soldiers. Help us before we perish. And then it would start all over again. Peoples of the world, listen to the alarm bells ringing from Hungary. SOS, help us. Now, I'm telling this story on stage in Hungary, and my translator started crying, which was very disconcerting because I'm supposed to be giving a speech, he's supposed to translate, and so I kind of bumped him to kind of shock him a little bit, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, great, you know, I mean, you're supposed to, I can't communicate if you don't talk, and I'm in charge, you do what I do, you mimic me, you know, I'll tell you when to cry, and it's not now. So, this is what I'm thinking. So, and then the audience, somebody stood up and shouted. They were so emotional. It was amazing. I was scared. You know, I thought, what, they're going to kill me because I'm, you know, American or something. And he said, oh, no, that guy just stood up and shouted freedom. I thought, oh, because this was pretty new. I mean, the Berlin Wall had just come down. I didn't know who was what then. Nobody did. They didn't know in their own countries who was. They hadn't talked to each other. Parents and kids hadn't talked about things because they didn't want to jeopardize either one. And then the audience broke into singing their national anthem. It was beautiful, the Hungarian national anthem, because it opens with the words, God bless the Hungarian people with prosperity and with health. That's a pretty good beginning, and the only national anthem that's a prayer. So anyway, they broke into singing their national anthem. I thought, what is going on? He said, it's okay, it's okay. My translator said, it's okay, they're singing the national anthem. I thought, oh, great, you know, now they're taking over the platform. So, and when we were all done, I was backstage, and my translator pulled me aside. He said, "I'm so sorry." He says, "I apologize for that." He says, "You didn't know this when we were up there, but," he said, "my mother worked at that radio station. And when you started telling this story, and you started describing how you felt as a little 10-year-old boy in the United States listening to this, I felt what I went through as a 10-year-old boy in Budapest, wondering whether my mother was going to come home that night, because this pirate radio station, the Soviets couldn't find it, and it just kept going and going. It was a real embarrassment. Lasted for several days after the revolution was over." And he said, "It just hit me. Here we are on stage, those two little 10-year-old boys in a free country, talking about building our businesses in a free Hungary." He said, "It was just overwhelming." Now, let me ask you a question. So what? What difference does it make whether you were born in Romania in the 1950s or whether you're born in the United States and living in the United States at the turn of the millennium? What difference does it make? You say, "Well, in the United States we have freedom of speech." What difference does it make if you don't speak, if you don't say something? We have the freedom to travel. When I was in Gdansk, I gave a speech in Gdansk early when the Berlin Wall came down. I was amazed. When the whole thing was over, Sunday I'm at the hotel, and here are young couples walking along the North Sea, and they're holding hands together as they walk along the North Sea, and just so many of them, and it was like a crowd, and it was kind of amazing. I'm asking my host says, "Most of these people have never seen the North Sea." I said, "You're kidding, they're Polish?" He said, "Yes, they're Polish, but they've never seen the North Sea." I said, "I can't believe it. I mean, Poland's not very big, you know, it's not as big as Pennsylvania. I mean, you think they could drive to see the ocean, they'd see the North Sea." He said, "Well, it's just such a hassle. You know, you had your passport, and then you had to get a visa to go to the next village. You had to get a visa. So you had to sit down. You know what a village is like." He said, "You have to sit down, and the village, they meet, the committee meets that stamps the visa, and they say, 'Well, why do you have to go to the next village? What's your purpose? What's the purpose of the trip? And so why should they let you go to the next village?' They're not going to the next village." And they'd have to give a stamp, and there's the communist thing, and there's the purity thing, and there's the collective thing, and there's the morality thing of the good of the others and the group. And so why are you going to use gas, and why are you going to do that? For what? To see flowers or buildings in another village?" So he said, most of these people lived in Poland and haven't seen the North Sea. I went back to my room, I opened the window, and I looked out there, and I watched these couples just going up and down. You could just see dreams, you could see the dreams coming out of them, coming out of their ears and eyes as they held hands, these Polish young couples, and looked for the first time at the North Sea. Well, isn't it great to live in a country where we have the freedom to travel? And I say to you, so what if you don't travel? The freedom to start your own business, which means nothing if you don't start your own business. The freedom to see your dreams come true, which means nothing if you spend your life watching television. To eat and to sleep and to have sex and to watch television. I have a dog that eats and sleeps and has sex and watches television. God created us to be on television, to do something with our lives. Let me ask you a question. What's the difference? To lay face down in the mud in Hungary in the 1950s with zoning boards who won't let you expand your restaurant, and committees that won't let your son go to a higher university but decided he's going to be a vocational worker? You're face down in the mud, a boot on your neck, unwilling, unable to get up and do anything with your life, or to live at the turn of the century in the United States of America, the richest nation on earth with complete political liberty, face down in the mud. Nobody's boots on your neck, nothing holds you back, unwilling to get up and to do something with your life. What's the difference? What's the difference? If you're going to drive a cab, what's the difference of driving a cab in the Soviet Union or here? What's the difference? Get up! Get up! Do something with your life. You know, we talk about ancestors and descendants, and I like the Statue of Liberty. You know, I don't want to get too sentimental here on you, because I know how cynical you must be, but you know, the Statue of Liberty, there's under the line, the famous line we all memorize, something about breathing, something deal. Underneath that, there's a line that says, "Give me," in addition to "give me your tired, your huddled masses longing to be free," "give me the refuse from distant shores." I didn't even know that was there until I actually went there and saw it, and I saw the refuse from distant shores, and I thought, wow, but that's what we are, garbage. We're the garbage of the world. That's who we are. You know, we're the Puritan pilgrims who wanted freedom of religion who fled England, and the Catholics who formed the colonies in North Carolina, and the Baptist Huguenots who were fleeing the Catholics in France to found their own colonies. We're the Jews who fled Nazi Germany. We're the Irish who fled from the potato famine and the abuse from the British. We're the Italians that fled during the Panic of 1870 for a better life. We're the Mexicans crossing the border to the day. We're the Vietnamese that came by the hundreds of thousands in the 1960s. The rich Catholics could practice their religion right under the nose of the dominating Protestant class. And the rich Baptist Huguenots could survive and thrive in the Catholic atmosphere of France because they could pay their way. It was the garbage that came. It was the poor people. The rich Mexicans don't come. The rich people who knew what they were doing and were able to make accommodation could survive any kind of shifts throughout Asia, which is always shifting. But it's the garbage, the refuse, and the dreamers that came. And there it is. It says it on the Statue of Liberty. Give me the refuse from distant shores. And we, the trash, have built the greatest nation on earth. But it means nothing. It means nothing if we don't do something. All the internet means nothing if we don't do something. All the gadgets, all the special mailings, all the devices that have been proven by numbers and by focus groups and by studies and by polling data and by experience mean nothing if we sit. There isn't time to sit. You know, Longfellow, the American poet, said life is like two ships crisscrossing the ocean in the middle of the night, going in opposite directions. Said in the darkness, someone lifts a lantern, you hear some noises, you hear the flap of a sail, you hear a bell, you see polished wood, you see brass, you see a few faces, and then you're plunged into darkness. That's Longfellow's description of life. There isn't time for us to be petty. There isn't time for us to be lazy. There isn't time for us to regret. There isn't time for us to fight. There isn't time for us to be mean. There is just barely enough time to reach out and seize the opportunity in this great country at this great moment, not only in the history of the world, but in the history of civilization and civilized people. There's just enough time to reach out and grab the opportunity and to go with that opportunity and to do something with that opportunity. Napoleon said ability means nothing without opportunity. Here it is. Opportunity in this room, bursting from this room. Here it is. Opportunity. I give you opportunity.